Stand by. Is this thing on?
Yes, Dan.
Oh, hello.
You're listening to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
This just in.
Breaking news to report.
We are live.
Old newscasters
Can we just say former?
Sure. Former newscasters reunite behind the mic after more than 20 years.
Old news is good news.
Stay tuned.
Welcome to Old News with Dan and Carrie. I am Carrie.
Yeah, and I'm Dan, and our guest today is a guy that we have not seen in a while, and it's really a self-indulgence for us. Another person that we worked with way back when at 27 First News at WKOW-TV in Madison, Wisconsin. Today, he is working at WBBM in Chicago, Channel 2's CBS affiliate. He's a segment producer there in Chicago, and he's doing some other things now too. We were just chatting about that, but his journey has taken him to Chicago from, I think, Topeka, Kansas was his first job. It's Zak Spector, who used to be an anchor producer and also reporter at Channel 27 when we worked with him. And he did the movie reviews too.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. I almost forgot about that.
Great.
That's what I was thinking about today. Yeah, good to see you, Zak.
Great to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh,
You
so
really
good to
made
have
it to the big time. You are in a Market 3 main station. Good for you. You're really still in it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm a Chicago native. I'm originally from this area, and like you said, Dan, I started my career in Topeka, Kansas, as a photographer, and then from there I was in Nebraska, and then Madison, and then I came to Chicago, and I've been here for, at LinkedIn tells me it's over 20 years, but it doesn't feel like it.
I know. I saw that. I was looking at it. I was like, it's been more than 20 years that Zak has been in Chicago. And that's a long time to be at any job, but to be working in TV news in Chicago for 20 years. I mean, that's some good endurance, I have to say, because I mean, that's one of the toughest news markets in the country because it's one of the biggest news markets in the country.
It is. I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I've been blessed to work with a lot of fabulous people. Of course, no one reaches the Dan and Carrie strata, but I've worked with some great people, and I've it's been a real pleasure to work with people that I used to watch as a kid, and then get to produce shows with them, and that is really a thrill. And then just to be part of big stories over the really my career, which is coming close to 30 years, be every major story. It's been a real pleasure to say, I remember it. I was in the control room. I was in the newsroom. Here's what we did. Here's my story. Things that have become history now. I was there in the newsroom like you guys were. And that's really kind of a thrill.
We'll start at the current position that you have. What is a segment producer? What do you do? What does your day look like?
Well, so I actually do a bunch of different things, and it kind of defies a category even for the current world of TV where the silos are breaking down as is. So I am really kind of a writer, producer, segment producer, photographer. I shoot, I've recently started shooting video again, so I'm back out on the streets finding stories. For example, Monday, I produced our 4 o'clock newscast. Tuesday, I grabbed a camera and went out, shot a story at the Chicago History Museum. Today, I was writing and editing 2 packages. And then on Thursday and Friday, I'm going to write and edit stories for the 4 o'clock newscast again. So it's all kind of all over the place.
So you're a Swiss Army knife, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wherever they go. Today I was editing a story about AI and how a college here in the Chicago area is tackling that issue from a humanistic standpoint. And then breaking news happens, and the producers from today's shows yell, "What are you doing, Zak?" And so I jumped into that and did a breaking story for them, writing and editing it, and preparing it for the newscast that was already on the air at the time. So this is news, as you guys know. You got to be able to do it everything.
Well, and that's not unusual now from what we've heard from everybody we've talked to. I mean, back in the day when Carrie and I were working in news, you kind of had, like you said, your silo, you did your job, and you came back and did it the next day. But now you're pretty much doing every job, it sounds like, other than, not everybody is anchoring the 10 o'clock news or whatever.
Right. And even in a place like Chicago, where you have people who are really advanced in their careers, and they're used to doing their own job. Everybody's doing everything now. And it's the industry. It also has a lot to do with technology.
Right.
It has to do with the fact that, you know, you guys remember carting around those big 30 to 40 pound cameras with us everywhere. Well, you know, our iPhones shoot video that is better than that video ever was. And not to mention the demands of needing content. At CBS2, we have a 24-hour streaming service that goes alongside our broadcast. Not to mention the fact that we're producing more news on broadcast, new original hours per day than I think I've ever done. Been at a station that has done. And so it's the demands are higher, the responsibilities are higher, but also the opportunity is higher because I can go out and find something that I just think is fascinating and go out and do.
Now you've been there, you said over 20 years at WBBM, right? Did you go
Yeah.
straight from Madison to Chicago?
I did.
I mean, that's a giant leap. Most people don't take that step. They go somewhere else in between.
Yeah, and I was trying to, and then this job in Chicago happened. When I left Madison, there had been a layoff, so I got caught up in the layoff, and I came back to Chicago, where I'm from, and my folks were living, and I was figuring that I would move on to another maybe a medium-sized market, and I happened to make a one-off phone call to CBS to Chicago. I don't remember why. I believe I had some misbegotten notion that maybe someone would talk to me over there, which, you know, in 2001 is ridiculous. No one's going to talk to me there.
Right.
And it was just a whole bunch of serendipity that happened. They happened to put me on the phone with the assistant news director. I have no idea why anybody would have done that, but they did. And the guy almost hung up on me. He was aggravated. He's long gone, but he was aggravated to be talking to me. And he says, "We're only hiring writers. We don't want reporters. Email this woman if you're interested." And I said, "Well, I mean, I'm looking for a job." So I emailed her. She emailed me back and she said, "Here's how it works. Show up for work at midnight on Sunday night, next Sunday night, because you're going to work. She said, "Come on in and I'll do a writing test." And I said, "Okay." And I put on my tie, my suit, and I showed up with tapes and my resume. And she's like, I don't want to see that. Sit down and write 5 stories. You have 15 minutes. And I said, "Okay."
Based off the wires or
She gave me 5 wires, I think, printed out. Back then we used paper. So she printed it out and gave it to me. And I wrote 5 stories. And she was about ready for the 5 o'clock newscast. And I said, "Okay, well, I'm done." And she said, "Okay, well, if I want you, I'll call you, but I'm busy right now, so you can leave." And I said, "Okay." So I left. And she said she must have liked what she saw. And she said, "Okay, come in at midnight. We're going to give you 2 shifts. You're going to be here midnight, whatever day it was, Monday night at midnight, Tuesday night at midnight. You will do 2 8-hour shifts on the morning show. And if that works out, I'll call you back and we'll see." And I said, "Okay."
So
I did my 2 shifts.
They would just pay you as like a contractor for those 2 shifts if it didn't work out?
Yeah. I'd be a freelancer.
Yeah,
So I would freelance those 2 days. I did them. And I remember it was, I was home at 7:30 in the morning, went to sleep. And when I woke up, I was staying with my dad. When I woke up, my dad's like, "You got a message on the machine. You're supposed to come back at midnight. You're now on the schedule." And I said, "Oh, okay, great. I'll do that." And then I couldn't get a day off for like 8 months or something like that. I mean, I just worked whatever they'd give me. I worked.
Well, you were a good writer. You're a good writer. So it worked out. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It must have worked. But you know what's interesting about this? I'll tell you. I worked with 4 people on that first night. I am still close friends with all 4 of them. And that was in 2001. I'm still in contact with them. One of them I still work with. One of them is one of my best friends in the world. And one of them is now in, I think, Memphis. And I talk to her all the time too. So, we definitely bonded. And you know what that's like.
Graveyard, that graveyard shift brings everybody together.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 1.5 years, and then I got a staff. They made me staff, and I took over the morning show.
So how many writers were there for the morning show? I mean, when we had our morning show in Madison, we had 3 of us.
You two,
and
right?
And you,
and you, and then the guys in the booth, and the camera crew. But we didn't have a lot of writers. What did you guys have writing for the morning show there?
Back then, we had 2 hours. We did 5 to 7, and we had 2 producers and 2 writers.
Okay.
So the 2, they each did it, the producers each did an hour, and then it was me and the other writer, and we just kind of wrote for everything. And morning news is very often on a wheel, so some stories kind of repeated later.
Right.
Ratings show that people don't really watch 2 hours, they watch a certain segment. You're just trying to be there when you catch
I don't know. I
catch
get
the
up at 4 and start watching and don't stop.
Just sit on the couch the whole
You're
time.
taking notes. Well, I can tell you that it's certainly CBS 2 is a lot nicer than it was back in those days. There is not quite the trial by fire that it was then.
Mm.
And thankfully we've got a lot of great staff members now, a lot of great writers and producers, and we're not kind of putting their feet to the fire in that way, the way we did it back then.
That's incredible. So you were a one-person band, as we said back then. I know they're now called MMJs or MSJs, right? We've been learning
Exactly.
from the others that we've talked with. How did that prepare you? So, and I should explain, that means you were out with the camera, you were reporting live, you had the live truck, you'd send up the mast and be talking to us from wherever news was happening. How did that prepare you for your roles in Chicago?
I actually think that in general, being like I said, I wanted to be a reporter in Topeka, but I got a job as a photographer, and I said, well, it's better than working at the drugstore, so I'll go do that. And so
Was it? Was it really?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I did get discounted Tic Tacs, so but I think that focusing, instead of just focusing on the words or just focusing on the video, that informed my storytelling.
Mhm.
That all of my stories are built, even if I'm doing what we would call a 15-second voiceover, I'm editing the video as I'm writing the words. And I think that creates a more integrated experience for the viewer, which is what you're going for when it's TV. I feel like for me, and I don't want to speak for other people, but just writing the words and then going back and doing the video or handing the video off to somebody else, for me, isn't as good. It doesn't create that the words and the video, to me, support each other better when I can do them together. So I'll give you, for example, the stories that I was editing today, the packages that I'd shot, and I was writing these stories. I actually, we have an anchor voice them.
Oh, I was going to ask if you were voicing. Yeah.
It's not me. We give it to an anchor.
Okay.
But I always edit the entire package with my own voice first, because I want to see that it's going to work. I build the story as I'm editing it. Yep. And I change tracks. I kind of put together video the way I like it, and then say, I think I'm going to say this, this, and this. And I kind of bring it all together. And I feel like for me, that works better. That creates better storytelling. That creates a better, I think, a better experience for our viewers.
It's kind of like writing a song, really. I mean, you're basically making a song demo, and then you're giving it to a different artist to record that song. I mean, and
Absolutely.
It's kind of funny. I used to think of stories that way too, Zach. There's a rhythm,
Absolutely.
It just the way it comes together. And I always thought, boy, it's like writing a song. So it's good to hear that other people kind of created stories and projects that way too. A question for you on, so are you also doing longer form, like documentary type projects as well at WBBM? Do they do that kind of thing anymore? Or are you doing more kind of like, daily story type stuff?
I do. My stuff is closer to the daily stories. I mean,
Okay.
I'm working on like tomorrow, I'm going to be writing the 4 o'clock.
Okay.
But, and that'll be a lot of stuff that, you know how this goes. Stuff that comes off the wires, stuff that we've shot, stuff that reporters are doing that I help that get on the air. We at Channel 2 are actually doing a lot of long form stuff, but we're big into investigations, and the investigations they've been able to do are just amazing.
Yeah.
Like laws are being changed because of these investigations.
Wow.
They even did a streaming series that aired on, I think it was Paramount Plus. And on the local level, that's unheard of. It was like a 3 or 5 part streaming service or streaming series. I think it was 5 parts. And so we are doing that kind of stuff. That's a different department than mine.
Yeah.
But I think that TV these days, we can't think of TV as just you know, the thing that happened this morning, we're going to put on the air at 4.
Mhm.
We have to think about longer form things. Even if they do an investigation, it'll be something that goes for months and months and months where we check back on it constantly and we do not let it go. I think that there was a feeling that like if you got caught up in an investigation, they did it once and the station would let it go. We follow up on that to make sure changes are made.
Hmm. What was your experience like during COVID?
COVID was unlike anything ever. You know, I was sitting right here doing a lot of the work.
Oh,
I worked from home for a good portion of it. I never thought we'd be able to do that. I never when we all had to go home, I thought there's just there's just no way. There's just no way we're going to get this done, and we did because we had to.
yeah.
And I will also say that, like, of all the stories we've done, of all the things, you know, hopefully our stories are important and people feel they enrich their lives and they understand their world better and they feel more empowered because they know things. But COVID was unlike anything else because everything was important to every person on the planet.
Hmm.
And we even rethought what would be a story. You know, you guys know what this is like, where you're like, well, that's not a story, or that's one piece of information that's not a story. But during COVID, we had to get that information out no matter what. It was
Mhm.
that vital.
Mhm.
So we were putting out whatever we could that we thought would be important to people, even if it didn't fit the mold of a normal news story.
Or before the pandemic, were you recording interviews on Zoom and on FaceTime and things like that? Or did that kind of come out of the
That was a
pandemic?
COVID thing. Yeah,
And
that was a
has
COVID
it
thing.
has it continued to happen? I mean, now it's just sometimes it just makes it easy to get an interview and get a soundbite as compared to back in the day. It was like you'd have to drive across town and get that
Well,
interview.
and that provides new opportunities. So
Correct.
when we,
Yeah.
you know, we used to have this notion that unless I shot it on a Betacam or unless I shot it in HD, it wasn't TV ready. Well, first
Mhm.
of all, Zoom is actually probably, if it's not HD, it's close to HD.
Right.
But also when we kind of let go of that kind of older idea, that opened up a world of being able to do stories in a way more stories and bring more video to people we didn't think we'd be able to do. And it was almost like with COVID, we kind of threw off the shackles of that kind of thinking and said, you know what? This guy is this guy's across town or on the other side of the world. We're still going to do the interview with him
Right. Yeah.
because we can do it. In fact, I did a story. There was something that was going on in the Loop, and an artist had put up a mural, and I needed to get a hold of the guy and interview him. He was in Prague for the next 3 months,
Oh,
and the PR people said, "Well, we'll just get him for you." And I said, "Great." So we did a Zoom for that, for something that was literally across the street from my station,
Right.
that's
but we were able to do the story because of it.
Well, that's the
Hmm.
beauty. I mean, here you're in Chicago, I'm in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, and Carrie's, in near
Pittsburgh.
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 So, I mean, you could be in London right now for all.
I wish I was in
Yeah,
London.
I wish I were too. I wish we were both in
Trip
London
to
and we could be
London,
That sounds
everyone.
like
hanging out in London
fun.
together.
Hey, Zach, there's a very cool looking award behind you. Can you tell us about it?
That looks like an Emmy.
That is an Emmy. That is, yes, that's what this one is.
Yes,
over
show
there.
us. Show us up close, please. So if the
This is
people
an
on
Emmy.
YouTube
I
watching can
wasn't
see it.
I wasn't even going to put it back here. I put it back there as a joke.
I made
You
it.
forced him
I
to
said,
do
do
that.
it.
Yeah.
Put it in there.
But it's, the thing about any award, as you know, is that you don't win anything alone. You always win it with a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I've been lucky enough to be part of like great teams that has resulted in work that's been recognized. And so every time I think of things like that, I might make a joke about it, but I think about like being in the newsroom with everybody else and the people who also are named on the awards and the people who sometimes aren't named on the awards, but because my computer worked that day or because the camera worked that day or because our studio is very high tech and very cutting edge and works, we're able to do it. So that's
What
kind
was
of
that
when I think of this.
specific? What was the award for?
This one?
Mhm.
This one was for spot news coverage for a college shooting,
Oh, good.
a campus shooting.
Mm.
Mm.
And we just
Fortunate,
won
yeah.
one. Yeah, I mean that's the kind of double-edged sword of a lot of this is
Right.
that very often you win an award for something horrible.
Right.
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 And we just won one for the newsroom won one for our coverage of the Highland Park July 4th parade shooting,
Yeah.
which I'm in Highland Park right now.
Oh, wow.
And that was that's another day. Never forget. My wife and daughter were in that parade,
Oh
and
my
they
God.
had not started marching yet when the shooting had happened. But that's how I found out about it. I was in the newsroom at the time.
So you were working at the time, and then you knew they were on their way to the parade or on their way to be in the parade. And how long did it take you to find out that they were okay?
Well, my wife called me and
Okay.
said, we didn't know anything was going on. I get to work at whatever, 9 o'clock in the morning. The parade's going at 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Right.
And my wife calls me and says, Zach, we're hearing that, she says, I just ran home. We just heard that there was a shooting.
Oh.
And that's what started the whole thing for us in the newsroom. So that's one that, I'm proud of the coverage that we had that day because it was personal. I'm proud of that was one where we needed to inform people. We needed to be on the air. We needed to, there was a scared community, and it's my community. And so I felt very purposeful and very needed and those are the days why we get into it.
Hmm. Wow.
Hey.
What other really memorable stories have you been part of that will stick with you forever?
There's unfortunately a lot of them aren't very good stories. But I remember being in the newsroom when Osama bin Laden was killed.
Oh.
And I remember it happened right before we went on the air. And the newscast I'd been working on all day was completely obsolete at that point. And the network was going to go on for a while, and then we went on, and we were just calling it as it went. We just were like, take this, take that, see if we can do that. Who's over there? It was me and a writer and a couple of other folks. We had a reporter. It was a veteran reporter, a highly decorated reporter who happened to be in that day, and a photographer and a couple of people, and we gathered stuff for that day. Another one that stands out is the George Floyd riots in Chicago. We had, our management was smart enough and was adept enough to make sure we had cameras everywhere. And so this was something that unfolded on the news. Our video was live. I remember some good stuff like the Cubs winning the World Series. I remember being in the newsroom for that one and just going, oh my God. My entire life, the Cubs winning the World Series. Insane.
I think all of us were doing that. I was sitting on my couch going, oh my God.
How could this happen? I mean, we were thrilled about it. I've been a lifelong Cubs fan, but we were just amazed. So I'm trying, obviously September 11th happened within 6 months of me moving to Chicago. So I remember that. I remember how that I remember that every hour of that day and every day of that week, I remember it.
Well, and I was going to ask you that. So you were in Chicago already. Carrie, were you already off of the news desk by 9/11?
Yes.
You
yes.
were.
I was in my house in Illinois because I left when I was 8 months pregnant, and then my daughter was like 4 months old.
Okay, because Zach, you basically became the anchor after I left for a while there at First News.
Yeah, I was filling in for probably about 6 months.
Yeah, and I remember when that happened, and I was out of the business, and that's, you're at the center of the universe when those stories happen, and you're working in the news business. I mean, as you've just kind of described, and I remember being out of the business at that time, and it wasn't long that I had been out of the business. And Carrie, maybe you felt this way too. You really felt like, oh gosh, I wish I was covering, even though it was a terrible event. You wish like you were there in the middle of it all, because you just got information so much quicker, and you felt like you knew what was going on, and you had this purpose to get it on the air. Well, like you said with the Highland Park situation. I don't know if you felt that way, Carrie.
I just remember being glued to the TV, just going, what is happening? And just having that feeling of total helplessness. And, now I have a little baby, and I thought, oh my gosh, is the whole world going to blow up? What is going to happen right now? It's just terrifying.
Hey, Zach. So
I remember
go ahead.
I was saying that I had actually gone home for the day because I was working the morning shift. So I went home at 7 and I turned on the morning news, the network news, and saw what happened, because it had happened in the time it took me to get home.
Mm.
And I called them back and I said, I'm coming back in. You need me?
Mm.
And they said, get back here.
Yeah,
And
all hands on
so
deck, right?
they didn't know what we were going to do. So I hopped on a bus, and I remember going from where I lived, which was at the time Lakeview, down into the Loop, if you know where that is in Chicago, and watching everybody else flood out of the city, and I was going into it. And people here were very afraid. We didn't know if the attacks were continuing. We have some famously tall buildings here in Chicago, so
Right.
people were scared about that too.
When we worked together in Madison, we were just on the cusp of social media, and it was, we had email, we would update our primitive website at the time. Now, so much is website driven. Can you talk about some of the changes and evolutions that you've experienced in the last 20 some years?
Well, you're right. It has come from when I first came here to, hey, we've got this new website. We can put our news on the website. Isn't that great? To, streaming 24/7 now. And we have, Paramount Plus, where we're putting content out all the time over there. And, each time something changes, the needs change, the opportunities change. We talk about all the time, like, I wouldn't have time to put this on a 10 o'clock newscast, but I can put it on streaming. And we've watched people's habits change. We've watched more viewers, more and more viewers get our content through digital means versus broadcast, although a lot of cord cutters go back to broadcast. So that's been happening as well. And I find that so fascinating. And the one thing I can say that will always stay the same is that we will always have change. This will always be in flux. It will always be updated and changed. And it's incumbent upon us to come up with new ways to reach our viewers.
I think it's funny that what you just said about, cord cutters going back to broadcast TV, because my kids, maybe your daughter too, or your kids, like, I remember when I got an antenna after we got rid of our cable TV because we're getting more streaming services, and my kids were like, wait, like, you can get TV stations by that thing? It's this dinky little rabbit ear thing. And you get, like, I don't know how many channels it is now, because, every TV station has four
It's like 3 or
channels
4.
as well as its main channel. So you get a lot of programming, it's not Netflix
For
all the
free.
time, but and it's free. Well,
Yeah.
you got to watch ads. You
Yeah.
got to watch the advertising.
That's what they always say. If it's free, then the product is you.
There you go. Good point.
Interesting.
I want to go way back to when you worked in Topeka and you were working at that drugstore. So that must have been right after college for you, because you're a Buffalo. You went to Colorado, right?
I am.
You're a Buff.
I am. I'm a diehard Colorado fan to this day. And some of the stuff over here is, you'll see little buffaloes everywhere.
Do you have your Deion Sanders bobblehead somewhere?
I don't have Deion. I have a Deion Sanders hat somewhere over
there
here.
you go.
I have to figure out where it is.
What made you
Coach
can I interject one little thing? What made you go to Colorado for college, being from Illinois?
I don't have a good reason, but I do have a good story. So the story was
even better.
We always used to go camping in Colorado. I have family in Denver, and we always used to go camping in Colorado. And my junior year of high school, we were going to it was the summer, and my dad said, hey, let's go like visit schools. And, from Chicago, you go to like Iowa or Wisconsin or Indiana, certainly U of I or Northern Illinois, all those schools. And
Milwaukee.
Oh, yeah, that's right, in Milwaukee. I remember that. And we were camping in Estes Park, and I said to my dad, if I get to move somewhere, I mean, I like Colorado. Is there a school I could go to here? And he said, yeah, there's this really great school. A lot of my family from Denver had gone to CU. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you guys know the geography, when you come from Estes to go to Denver, you go right through Boulder. And he says, we're going to pass by it. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you what, why don't we stop? We'll get lunch on campus, and you'll see the campus for an hour. And I said, oh, sounds great. And we were headed in, and our car broke down in Boulder. And we stayed in Boulder for 2 days while it was being fixed. And I said, I love this. I want to come back.
Wow. Talk about destiny.
That's how it happened. But I didn't have a major at the time. So I was just kind of picking a place that I felt comfortable in. I felt that would be kind of an inspiring thing for me, something that would help me find something. And I really wanted a big school. I went to a small religious high school, and I really wanted something with opportunity.
And then what
So
made
it
you
was
decide to go into journalism? Did you end up majoring in journalism during
I
school?
did. Yeah, I majored in broadcast news at CU. And the reason why was because I remember I must have been a sophomore. And I took all my, since I didn't have a major, I took all my prerequisites first, got those out of the way, especially because I didn't have a direction one way or the other. So I remember thinking, God, this is really interesting. I really enjoyed college. I really enjoyed the classes. I liked all of it. And I remember thinking, geez, I'm taking a history class. I'm going to be a history guy, whatever that means. I'm going to go into history. And then I would go to my next class and it would be like, I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was like an architecture class. I'd be like, this is really, I'm going to do that. And then I'd go to the next one and it would be literature or something. I'd be like, wow, I could be an English professor. This is going to be great. And after a while, I realized that journalism was a way to do everything. It was a way for me to keep studying everything. And because on any given day, I guarantee you, I'm going to be writing a health story. I'm going to be writing a finance story. I'm going to be writing something about history. I'm going to be writing a story about culture. And I'm certainly going to be writing stories about politics, sadly, crime or bad things that happen. And that's really it. I thought, well, if I'm in journalism, I get to do everything.
Very true.
Yeah, you're kind of a jack of all trades. That's I think why a lot of us got into journalism. Good thing you didn't walk into like a embalming class or something like that, because that
you joke, but I looked into being a funeral director at one point.
Really?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You would be very good at it.
I don't know. Well, here's the thing. I think that I could talk endlessly to my clients and they wouldn't complain. That would be the advantage. But when I was in high school, I was looking for a summer job, and a friend of mine knew a funeral director, and I said, "Well, let's see if we can get a job here. It's going to pay more than the mall." And the guy did not hire us. I don't know why. Don't know why.
Teresa, my wife and I, we were just talking about some friends of hers and mine when we were just first married. They lived right above a funeral home. So their apartment was right upstairs of the funeral home, and their laundry room was downstairs right next to the embalming room.
Oh my God.
We went over there for dinner one day and they asked us, would you like to go down and see the embalming room? Like,
sure.
I hope they hosted Halloween parties. That would be awesome.
They didn't live there real long, but yeah. So hey, good on you that you actually wanted to do that for a while. And good thing we have people who do that, right?
I felt like it was a job. It was something people needed, and conceivably it paid more than working at the movie theater, the shopping mall, or wherever I would have worked.
Right.
Now we can go back to Dan's original question. You're working at the drugstore. I interjected the drugstore, and then your first job.
Yeah, I how this works, or at least it did back in the day, where you would send tapes out and then you would go try to take a trip out there and meet people. So I did a bunch of those. I did Topeka, coming out of Colorado. I went to Topeka. I went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I went to St. Joseph, Missouri. And I was, what I did, which was really, I thought was very valuable. I had a good friend who graduated with me from CU, and it gets really discouraging. I mean, back then we had to make tapes and send tapes out. I mean, now you send a YouTube link, but back then, it was really discouraging, and it was really a lot of work.
Yeah, it took you hours and hours to get the tape together. Yeah.
You were in the basement of something copying tapes, and not to mention it cost money. And so, which you didn't have. And so we used to have a support group. We would meet at like a coffee shop every couple of weeks and say, okay, where are you looking? Where are you looking? What are you doing? And so that's how we did it. But like I said, that news director, I mean, it helped. It helped. It kept us honest. It kept us working at it. But I know that I was looking at other sort of side journalism jobs, like working at a radio station or a magazine in Denver. And I remember those jobs stalled out on me. And I remember saying, you know what? If I'm ever going to go into TV, I got to do it now. Because if I wait till if I wait a few years, I might have a significant other, I might have a child, I might own a house. I mean, whatever is going to be an entanglement. I said, you know what? If you're going to do it, do it. And that's when I started traveling and ended up getting the Topeka job.
And then you went to Lincoln after Topeka?
I did that woman that I was telling you about that graduated Colorado with me, and we
Yeah.
were support groups. She had moved to Lincoln. She got a job in Nebraska, and I'd
Mhm.
gotten the job in Topeka. And I was started as a photographer in Topeka, and I wanted to be a reporter. And I was doing some reporting on weekends there, but she had her news director in Lincoln had a full-time reporting job. And so she connected me to the news director there, and I ended up getting hired and moving there. And then
Here.
I was there for about a year and a half. And it's funny, I still talk to people from Lincoln and I'm Facebook friends with a few people from Topeka, and
Sure.
still friends with that woman who got me that job, and a couple of other people I met in Nebraska when I was there.
Mhm.
I did that for about a year and a half, and I wanted to move. I wanted to move either further east or way west.
Mhm.
And I remember getting offered a job in Chico, California, and not taking it because it just wasn't right. And I had applied for a job in Madison. I was back in Chicago to visit, and I went up to Madison to meet news directors
Oh.
and hand out tapes. And I started a relationship with the news director at Channel 27, and he had
You
an
should
opening.
clarify that you started like a meeting relationship with the
Yes, a professional relationship. I
We were
became
dating.
friends with became friends with the news director, and he was hiring a job, and I want to say I kept in touch with him for like 5 or 6 months trying to get this job. And I
Mm.
think it was the job. I know you guys just had Rena Sargentopoulos on. I think it was the job that she ended up getting, the one in
Oh,
Rock County.
Oh
I was
yeah,
going to
The
say
the
Rock
bureau.
County Arena.
Rock
Yes.
County Arena, yes, the Sarge. And I didn't get that job, obviously, but he called me back like maybe 2 weeks later and said, "Well, I've got this other job for someone who knows how to shoot video. Are you interested?" And I said, "Sure." And then 2 months later, or whatever it was, I was packing up and moving to Madison.
He said, we have this other job that is even better because you get to get
Even
up at
better.
1 a.m, go shoot video, take the
On
live
the
Well, I
truck
was
live
out in
truck alone.
snowstorms.
Yeah.
I didn't start on the morning show
Oh, you
when I was
didn't?
first came to no, when I first came to
Oh,
Madison, I did
really?
not start on the morning show. I was nights and weekends, and
Okay.
and so I mean, it's TV hours are TV hours. It still
Mhm.
wasn't 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, but
Mhm.
I did that. I remember I'd been there, and I'd only been there for maybe like a few weeks or a month, and there had been a tornado.
Oh,
And I remember they called me at home and said, and I lived right by the station, "Get your gear, you're going out." I was maybe supposed to be in at 9 or 10, but it was like 7 or 8 in the morning. They're like, "Get your stuff, you're going out." So I went out, and I remember I was on the phone with the desk, and they were just saying, "Just wherever we hear of something, you're going." So I shot a bunch of, I want to say I shot a piece for myself. I shot another piece that an anchor may have written and edited, and a bunch of other little stories. And it was just a day of just gathering news, and we put it on the air that afternoon or that evening.
wow.
And I moved into the morning show when I think it was Jamie Glinberg left, and
Jamie
I
Yes.
left,
took
yep.
over for him.
And we talked with him recently as well.
I
Reminiscing
saw how
the good
cool.
old days. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
it's
I
been
mean,
fun seeing all the names of the people you guys are like, oh yeah.
well, one of the things too, Zach, too, I mean, and Carrie, we fiddled around with that show quite a bit, the morning show. I mean, I could, like we talked about before, you were doing a movie review, and I was thinking about this, and I think it's when you came on board too. Remember, Carrie and Zach, we started moving like the set around. Suddenly, we get
I
off the
tell
set, and then we had like a living room set. We decided we'd
I
make.
tell that story to everybody, that
About
we used to go out to the lobby at, I'm not sure if the station's still there anymore, but on Tokay Boulevard,
Yeah, it is.
the
It is.
we used to go out to the waiting room and take the couch and move it into the studio, use it for like interviews or whatever,
Yeah.
and then move it back
Before
when
they arrive.
before they arrive, so that they could have their lobby again.
I totally forgot about that. And let's talk about the movie reviews a little bit. So
Yeah.
you were just a movie lover at the time, right? And how
Yep.
did that whole thing get going, and describe what you did in your movie reviews?
Well, if you remember, there was a radio DJ there named Zak, and I forget his last name. His name was Zak
Yeah.
also. So
Oh,
we teamed up to do them together. We were the Zak and Zak movie reviews.
yep.
And
Oh,
so he, great guy, and I'm sorry I've lost touch with him. If he sees this, please contact me. He was fantastic. And we would team up and we would shoot them together. And then if I remember correctly, we would air the thing we shot together on our newscast, but then I would call in and do the reviews on his radio show. So
Yeah.
we were able to kind of team up and do content both ways.
Well, you came at a good time because before you got there, I mean, we were still straight to the point, as that was kind of our thing.
Right. Yeah.
But like before you got there, our packages were like 60 seconds long. You'd have
Wow.
one sound
Yeah.
bite and,
115.
you know, yeah, 115 you'd get to go to. And, you know, it's hard to tell a story in 115, but sure did help you learn how to be concise.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen that in the industry, by the way. I've seen that coming and going. I've seen that trend cycle a number of times. I'm thankful that now, at least at Channel 2, but I think in the industry too, but here at CBS, it's what does the story need?
Yeah.
What does the story need?
Good
And
approach.
we will figure it out. But the opposite goes true, by the way. I was editing a story today, and I always jokingly, I have a good friend of mine sits next to me, and I always joke around and say, okay, well, she's my quality control over here. So I'm editing and she's, doing her show. And I turn my computer to the side because, we're editing on my desktop. We don't have to go in those back rooms anymore.
Oh, wow.
And I turn I turn my monitor and say, okay, watch this. And she watched it and said, I think that's too long. I think you're too long. I think you should pull that out.
How long
And I
was
said-
it originally when you did it?
It wasn't terrible. It was like maybe 130, 140, 145, something like that. But it wasn't about the number on paper. It was, she was sitting there and watching it and saying, I kind of feel like you're repeating yourself here. And I said, great. I mean, I appreciated that somebody had some really good feedback, and I trimmed it.
So what?
And I think it went down to maybe 120-ish. And I have no ego about making it long. I want it to be exactly as long as it needs to be. And I said, good. I appreciate the feedback. So that was a case where we went in the opposite direction.
Sure.
But she's, and I see it through her eyes, and I see it to somebody who, I was out there with the people doing the story. I became friendly with these people. I know them, and I need somebody who doesn't. I need someone who's watching it on TV for the first time, because viewers aren't going to see it 3 times. They're going to see it once.
Right. And that's, again, back to your point, like with the awards, it's such a collaborative business where you are working with so many people, and you have to rely on each other to, you have that trust that you build with those people for all those years. And, that's why you have Emmys on your shelf behind you, because you are willing to take that constructive criticism, and you have to be, I imagine. If you can't, I don't imagine you last very long in the news business.
I think you're probably right that it's, I will say that the news business is a nicer place than it used to be. And in a good way.
It was always nice at 27 First News.
We were always great. But I remember I worked with a lot of people who worked in the old days, and they would tell, back in the 70s and 80s, and they would tell me stories. Even when I first started, there were, which, already is 20 years ago. It was rough around the edges. I always felt that, like, news is always such a pressure cooker. We forge close bonds with people. Like I said, those people I showed up on that very first day are still friends of mine. So you find the good people, and there are people. I've called newsrooms when I was going through my career. I've randomly called newsrooms going like, oh my God, this guy's going to hang up on me. And they said, no, come on in. We'll meet you. We remember what that was like. We'll meet you. But I would say newsrooms, I think, are, I know at Channel 2, there is a lot of attention given to mental health, which is something that TV news has long ignored. Long ignored. Probably about 10 years ago, we stared paying attention, like the rest of
the whole world did.
I was going to say, everyone is more in tune with that now.
Yeah.
And I applaud CBS and Paramount, our parent company, for providing those resources, providing those opportunities. So it's a nicer place than it used to be. But, there's been times where there's been someone's yelled at somebody in the heat of the moment. I'll tell you something, though. Some of the closest friendships I have, or that I've had over the decades, are the people that could holler at me, and 5 seconds later we're best friends. Like I knew who they were, even despite if something came out of their mouths that wasn't great. I knew who they were. I knew we loved each other, and I do mean love. And I knew who they were, and they knew who I was. And 5 seconds later, we were like, fist bump and go, oh man, That was a hairy one. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.
That's a good team.
That
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Hey,
What
you.
advice?
Oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
Carrie.
What advice do you have for young people, maybe in journalism school today?
I would say open yourself up to doing something that you didn't picture doing. When I moved to Topeka, I said I wanted to be a reporter, and I didn't think of myself as a photographer or a technical person at all, to be honest with you. But picking up that camera has absolutely changed my life. Absolutely. I carried it through to my time in Madison because I was always shooting my own stuff. It also, when I wasn't shooting, it informed how I built my stories and how I built shows later. I had an understanding of the video. So I would say open yourself up to things that you really don't even picture yourself doing.
Good advice.
What's the worst job you ever had in the biz?
I mean, besides moving furniture at 2 a.m., I was
That was the best job.
Here's something funny. I remember, this is an old Madison story. I don't know if it was the worst, but I remember I was in a terrible mood one day, and I was doing like a weather shot, which, we always do. It's always that, we have to do the weather, but and by the way, again, TV news has got a better awareness of this nowadays. But back then it was, you had a blizzard. It's, negative 15 degrees. This is Wisconsin. Go outside and do a report. And I remember I was in a terrible mood. And our producer was Mike. And I remember, I had my IFB in, my earphone in, and
Mike Fuller.
It's like
Mike Fuller. I think. Yeah.
Mike Fuller. And how like we always, you'll do like, if in a 2-hour show, you'll probably do 4 live shots. And I was maybe on my 3rd or my 4th one. And I think, I remember hearing people in the studio, just in the control room, just laughing at what I was, and it was in such a bad mood. And I had on this jacket that was like a down jacket. And, the producer, and of course, years later, I was in that position. And the producer would say, like, can you do this a little more? Could you move to that way to a little more? This doesn't look very good. Can you light this? And there had been a series of things that I had to fix or I had to change. And I remember just being so cranky. And I remember the producer, like I said, I think it was Mike Fuller. I could be wrong on that. And he goes, like, laughing, Zach, that jacket looks really puffy. Do you have another jacket? I remember going, I realized that I'm being made fun of here. And and this is, objectively speaking, a funny joke. Now, I might not feel the laughter right now, but this is funny. And I'll tell you something, a funny opposite story. So fast forward years later, I'm at Channel 2, and I'm producing the 10 o'clock newscast on weekends and Saturdays and Sundays. And again, we have a, terrible weather out, stick the reporter out. They were doing something. I forgot what it was. And there was this wonderful, wonderful reporter we have here. She's now an anchor, Dana Kozlov, and there was a photographer, Paul Wheeler, and we'd worked together a long time and we knew each other. And I don't really remember what happened, but on Facebook the next day, they took a clip of Star Wars from Hoth. Remember in Empire Strikes Back where it was all snowy?
Yeah.
And he changed the track and he was mocking me about, like, producer Zach tells Luke to change, to do this or something like that. And he had changed, he had revoiced the scene of it. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And they were totally making fun of me, but you know what it's like in TV. You got to have a sense of humor.
Yes, that's awesome.
And you do.
Are there bloopers that have stuck with you over the years?
I'm not on air anymore, so the bloopers aren't me, but
You're like, thank goodness.
I know. I just rewatched. It's on YouTube now. The Survivor when Dan left.
Very special game show. Who Wants to Be a Survivor? Before the day's over, we will see one of our anchors, either Kevin, Dan, or Carrie, leaving First News.
The Survivor celebration. Remember we did that?
You're calling that a blooper?
Well, no, but it was a very funny moment.
Talk about taking liberties. We turned our whole show into a Survivor episode based on Survivor. We're like, one of us is leaving. Who's it gonna be?
Yep.
And you were the host. You were Jeff Probst, weren't you?
I was Jeff Probst. A very terrible Jeff Probst. But yes, and my daughter finds this hilarious only because she's like, wow, look, that's when Daddy had hair. And so if you remember, there was our head engineer, I believe his name was Steve, I forget his last name, and we had run through this with him and we were really lighting those torches. And he said, if I remember this correctly, maybe you guys remember this differently. He said, well, You know, it's possible that you're going to set off the fire alarm in the middle of a live broadcast.
Oh
And
my.
if that happens, the door in the back of the studio will slam shut, possibly severing all the cables that go to the cameras. But good luck. You know, I hope it works
Hope it
out.
doesn't happen.
I didn't know
And
that.
I seem to remember, maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but I remember
It
getting
sounds
this,
like it could
warning.
be possible.
I remember getting this warning. We did it anyway.
That must have been Steve Zimmerman because he knew his
Could have been.
stuff. He
Oh,
knew his
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and then I had the very tearful, like the little montage that I cried through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, my dad, oh, miss
Uh,
most of all, Scarecrow.
But we have to say, you know, I don't remember if it was Mike Ciola who was directing, or if
yeah, it was Mike Ciola by then, I
was
believe.
Mike Ciola.
Yep.
He did a fabulous job. He really did a great job. And when I think of what we do today versus what the technology was back then and how he got that done, I think it looked fantastic. Just watching it, whatever it was a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
I think it looked fantastic. He did a great job.
When he lives in my town here in Sun Prairie, and
Oh, really?
Does he?
Yeah, we caught up via email a little while ago. We still have to have coffee, and he's going to have to be on Old News now that you mentioned his name. I forgot
Heck
about
yeah.
I think so.
that. And
I
Zach,
think
I'm
so.
sorry, but we have to bring this to a close. You know what? This show is called Old News, but you're still new news because you're
Oh,
still
yeah.
in it, and you know, I'm really happy
Thank
for
you.
you.
Yeah, congratulations. You've
You've had a
you're at the
great
top.
career.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And you know what? I will tell you guys, I remember my time in Madison with you guys. I would say that is second only to college for me. Like, that is how I remember it, how informative it was, how important it was to me, and how much I enjoyed it. I really remember Madison so fondly because I got to work with you guys. It really set me on a path doing that. I feel like that's where I felt like a real journalist, a real broadcaster. I felt like that other stuff was like my post-college stuff, and I was learning, but Madison's where it happened. And it had everything to do with working with you guys. So I
Wow.
just remember it so fondly.
Wow.
Thank
Make
you,
me cry
Zach.
here. Thank you.
I know. Don't make me cry again.
Again.
About your departure from our show, Dan. Now this.
Well, keep up the great work, Zach, and we'll catch up with
Yeah.
you soon again, maybe at Summerfest.
You know, I'm always there, so I will definitely come. I will see you there. You'll
See
have
ya.
the guitar.
You got it.
All right.
Great
Thanks,
to see you,
Zach.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
That's old news for now.
Join us next time.